Hi everyone, welcome back to the Curiosity Exchange. I'm your host Sudeep. If episode 1 was about the future of human capital in the age of AI, today we are taking that curiosity one step further into the world of higher education. And joining me again is Professor Dr. Josse Roussel. He is an inspiring voice in finance, education, and human capital from the Paris School of Business. Professor, it's wonderful to have you back. So let's begin with a what if question. What if higher education as we know today, degrees, diplomas, ranking, simply vanished? Imagine a world where your ability to solve problems, create, or collaborate is your qualification.
Well, I think it's maybe not a question of what if, but it might be a question of when, because I think there is a revolution going on when it comes to higher education and education by and large, because obviously education has been in the business of developing human capital. As we know, human capital is basically centered around knowledge, skills, competence. And one of the only ways to develop skills, competence, knowledge has been through education. And so you have, of course, the education that you get within the family structure, the education you benefit from in the K-12 system, from kindergarten to high school, and of course, higher education. And on top of that, of course, there is life experience, the experience you get working on a job, your professional tenure that is building some experience. And with AI, with the fast moving and fast growing AI phenomenon, we're likely to see a drastic change in the field of education, the way it's delivered, the way it's consumed. And therefore, the vision that you shared with us of basically a revolutionized, turned upside down educational landscape where basically you don't have degrees anymore is likely to happen at some point. Now, obviously, there's going to be some transition, moving from the system we have today to maybe this new type of system that's going to emerge in the next couple of years or decades. And I think it's going to happen. And we have maybe to take stock and to look at what basically degrees are for, because we take it for granted that we live in a world, we live in a system, and I'm, part of it because I've been in higher education for a long, long period of time. So you have this idea that yes, we need to have degrees, and degrees are there for a reason. And yes, they so far, we're in 2025, and we can say that over the last, decades and centuries, degrees have basically been quite useful in giving a signal to employers, to people, giving like a status signal of where you're standing in terms of the knowledge, I would say ladder, just like we're talking about the corporate ladder, the ability to walk up the corporate ladder, the degrees, especially the higher education degrees, have been signaling to employers and others that where you're standing on that competence and knowledge ladder. And because it was almost impossible or very difficult to do otherwise, that is, we didn't have a system that would be able to so efficiently uh, signal to someone else where you're standing in terms of competence, in terms of proficiency, for example, in mathematics, in engineering, without a degree, a higher education degree. And therefore, I think this is going to change because with AI, and I see the combination of AI and probably the blockchain technology as well, it's going to be possible for people to sort of being certified in terms of competence achieved or knowledge that you have developed um, through an AI system. Because AI, artificial intelligence, is an absolutely fantastic tool to learn and to develop skills and competence. And I think we could see this shift, maybe in obviously it's going to take time, but I think in the next 10 years, like in the next decade, so from 2025 to 2035, I think there's going to be um, institutions pushing for that kind of change. And we can look at this also in the context of a massive demographic shift in terms of higher education, because higher education used to be a I would say something which was basically a minority, a very, very, very small minority of people. A lot of people, if you take a age cohort like, people born in the 1960s, for example, 1965, and you'd say, okay, what's the percentage of that age cohort who would get access to higher education? And until recently, until say the 1990s, the percentage of people going into higher education was quite limited in terms of a percentage of a cohort, age cohort, and over the last decades, there's been a quite significant surge in higher education um, in terms of the percentage of people reaching that level. And obviously, but when you look at economic studies, the premium that you get from higher education is still there. If you compare how much do you make when you have a bachelor's degree or master's degree as opposed to a high school degree, the premium is still there. But maybe it's not as big as it used to be. And therefore, in this context of having maybe not an oversupply of degrees, but at least a phenomenon whereby degrees are much more common than they used to be, then there's going to be a sort of challenge to the very importance and the very critical nature of the degree itself. And therefore, that creates an opportunity to have another type of system where what the degree was basically supposed to signal competence, knowledge, also diligence, hard work, all those things could be signaled by something else. And I think a combination of um, AI certificates with, certified with blockchain, for example, could be like the shape of what's going to come. I think it's very exciting because it's also very frightening, to the institutions involved in higher education. Because in such a transition, what's going to happen is that you're going to have new startups, higher education startups, ed tech companies who would probably design those kind of pathways to get sort of a AI blockchain certified competence achievement. And if the marketplace is buying it, by that I mean is validating this process um, of certifying competence, knowledge, expertise, hard work, wit, all of that, then that's going to be a significant competition to the, I would say, incumbent way of doing it, which is higher education institutions, curriculum, where you have classrooms, whether the classroom is physical or online, you have a cohort, everybody is, entering into the classroom having the same curriculum. And after a few years and a few exams, you have a degree. So this model is certainly going to be challenged by a something else, which we don't have a clear picture yet because it's not offered as such in a significant way, in a massive way, but it's going to happen. And this competition, I think, is probably going to come from first ed tech companies who would design those kind of competence accreditation systems, the knowledge accreditation systems, and will therefore allow learners, students, to acquire those kind of signals, because basically a degree is a signal, and therefore a signal of competence, and to acquire those signals in a different way. And probably even universities and higher education institutions by and large will also try to go in that direction, because I think many of them are aware of the challenge and also the opportunities that AI is representing in terms of this organizing education and certifying competence and achievements. I think there is it, and as I said, it's in the context of maybe being, I guess, uh, puzzled by what you could call the massification of higher education, because as I said, higher education was sort of elite until the 1980s. Not that many people went into higher education. And therefore, the fact that you got a degree from any kind of higher education institution in the 1980s or early 1990s was in and of itself sufficient to signal that you were smart, that you were hardworking, that you had this grit, the ability, to get into a challenging learning environment, and that therefore you had quite a lot of competence, quite a lot of expertise. But with the massification of higher education, maybe this signal is not as strong as it used to be, because you may think, and at least some companies and employers may think that maybe those graduates that are not so and not as skilled as they could be, and not as competent as they could be, because maybe they need also some professional experience, some sort of hands-on experience to complement the more theoretical knowledge that they have. And therefore there is, I think, a slight, it's not a massive, but a more critical vision of formal degrees because of massification of higher education. And we see, for example, a phenomenon that was non-existent in the 1970s and 1980s, which is this overqualification problem. That is, people being overqualified for the job that they're actually doing. That people are recruited with excessive level of qualifications. And obviously, when you've been trained into doing something at a high level, and when you perform a job which doesn't require the competence that you've been trained into, that you have developed through your formal higher education curriculum, then obviously those competences will be lost in a way. So that's sort of and there's going to be some frustration. So you see, it's not a very efficient system anymore. In some cases, because you have this really kind of new phenomenon of people being overqualified for the job that they are doing, and this is creating lots of frustration. Having said that, of course, there are still some fields in which a formal education and a formal degree is required and has still lots of value. If you think about medical studies, for example, if you think about engineering schools, but even in those fields, especially for engineering, for example, it could be certainly possible to see some kind of AI blockchain certified competence acquisition that would be competitive in that scale. But if you look at other types of degrees, for example, in humanities, in social sciences, in business and management, there's going to be a lot that we're going to be able to do with AI and blockchain technology to provide learners with a individual, tailor-made learning process and competence building pathway.
Almost like a shift from what paper you hold to what problems you solved. So, before we go further, let's address the elephant in every classroom today: AI. It is changing education like never before. As a professor, how do you see this moment? Opportunity or a risk?
Yeah, so because I'm optimistic, I think I see it more as an opportunity. So obviously, it's an opportunity that is likely to be game changing. So there are a lot of risks as well. And I guess, when you have lots of risks derived from an innovation, or I would say an innovative environment, which is emerging, then obviously you also have lots of opportunities. But so if you look at what education is looking, when you look at education and AI, the first thing that is going to come to mind is, of course, that when you give an assignment to a student, there is now a very high probability that the assignment is going to be AI manufactured in a way. That the student, instead of doing it by himself or herself, is going to rely on an AI and a chatbot to basically write an essay, for example. So that's, I think, the first AI kind of introduction, or when AI entered higher education, was really from a very negative lens, because it's basically like a cheating tool, to be blunt, and you just it's like a very sophisticated form of plagiarism. The plagiarism has been around in higher education and education, by and large, for a long period of time. The idea that you basically are going to steal material from others and put it in your work without any kind of referencing and without acknowledging the source of that work. And therefore, in higher education, when AI came along a few years back, because it's a very recent phenomenon, and all of a sudden there is this idea that it's going to be like plagiarism, but turbocharged, that you can basically outsource for example, the assignments that you've been given to you, and that therefore, from a higher education, perspective, that's a problem, because obviously, how can you assess the competence of someone based on assignments if those assignments have been written by a machine, by a bot, by AI? And so that's been like the very negative lens at first. That is, we have to fight against AI. We have to control the use of AI and so on. And I think it's a very fair concern, because let's face it, it's used massively in that kind of way. A lot of essays being turned in may not be genuine essays written by the student themselves. Um, and I guess already, not I guess, already higher education institutions try to check that, to control the I would say AI content, just like you have plagiarism check, and also to which is more, I think, relevant and probably much more useful, is to change the way you're going to test students. Because if you're aware that giving an assignment is it's difficult um, to be sure that the person has written everything, or most of it even, then I think the way you will test your students would be different. That is, you would say to your students, okay, you will use AI in order to produce a paper, but then we're going to grill you when you're on stage defending your paper, because we want to know if you have learned from this AI augmented, so to speak, paper that you have turned in. We know that this paper is not from you 100%. But we want to make sure that the knowledge that you have, played with uh, in this paper, that this knowledge is well mastered, that you know what you're talking about, and we're going to grill you on that. And I think in that case, you change the perspective, because you understand that AI is there. It's going to be used whether you like it or not, and and therefore you have to shift the way you organize the testing of the student, because higher education institutions have been organized basically in a couple of ways. It is, first, you design a curriculum, so subject matters that must be studied, and then you design, of course, a testing system which is there to ensure that the knowledge which is being transferred in the classes, with the different subject matters, different courses, that this knowledge has been successfully mastered by the student. And that's the reason you have exams and to have assignments and so on and so forth. But I think there must be a shift in that direction, and it's happening already. And what's going to be even more radical is to really transform the way you define and organize the educational experience from both the institution standpoint and the learner standpoint, the student standpoint. And this is where you use AI as sort of a knowledge companion, as a knowledge buddy, who's going to be there to sort of being like a coach, basically. And for example, you design a subject matter, say introduction to economics, and therefore the AI companion in introduction to economics is basically going to lay out, for example, a basic outline for maybe a economics 101, and then the student will have to ask questions and get some exercises to test the understanding of the subject matter, and in that way you will have something of a learning experience could be more tailored, more I would think more calibrated, more fine-tuned to the learning needs of the student. And obviously, that's going to be more complex to organize at first, but AI is so powerful that it can take care of that organizational challenge. And on top of that, as I said, there could be sort of a blockchain technology to sort of certify the different progress, the progression of the student, to show that there's been some critical milestones that the student has successfully completed in his pathway to mastering, for example, economics. And it could be, of course, then labor economics or international economics and so on and so forth. So I think that's the first that's the way it's going to happen. We see that AI is used and it's impossible to turn it back. It's just like if you were to say, okay, we have computers, students can write their essays on computers, and now they have to write it by hands. No, we want you to write it down on a piece of paper. I think it's impossible to go back and say that the computer is not going to be used anywhere in higher education. AI is going to be there. It's just impossible not to use AI anymore nowadays. Whether it's going to be in higher education, whether it's in companies for a lot of companies now for their business processes, whether it's marketing, whether it's supply chain, whether it's human resources, they are using and they're going to use more and more AI solutions. So higher education is not going to be an exception. It's just going to be part of it. And at first, as I said, yes, it was looked at in a very negative way because AI was basically cheating on steroids, plagiarism on steroids. Now you have some educational institutions are seeing that AI can be used in an intelligent way, in a learning way, in a positive way, and more we're going to move into that direction, and therefore, yes, it's going to be um, a great opportunity to completely redesign higher education and to provide a more tailor-made higher education experience going forward.
So AI could democratize access, but also flatten uniqueness. Suppose we combine that with our earlier thought experiment. If knowledge token replaced degrees, could AI become the evaluator, the ledger keeper of this new economy of wisdom?
Yeah, that's a huge question because there will have to be an evaluator in a way. There will have to be because the idea is, are we changing gatekeepers? Because higher education has been the gatekeepers the gatekeeper of competence with degrees. You have this production of degrees, and degrees, as I said, being a signal of competence, hard work, wit, diligence, and so on. And higher education being, therefore, the gatekeeper of the production of degrees. They had like the monopoly in terms of producing degrees. And if you have a AI-powered production of degrees, then AI is going to be sort of the new gatekeeper. Now, obviously, with AI, you have like different, platforms, just like you have different, let's say, accreditation agencies. You could look at AI in a way as a because AI, as I said, is a generic name, and if you look in the details, you have different platforms, different, say, bots, basically. If you look around, you have, say, Gemini, you have ChatGPT, you have DeepSeek, and so on. So you have those different bots, and they have more specialized even more specialized bots. And we could think, by the way, that there's going to be going forward some specialized bots, AI-driven bots in education, and therefore AI is going to be sort of a gatekeeper when it comes to the production of not really degrees, because maybe it's not going to be called degrees, but we could uh, look at sort of a certified knowledge accreditation, something of that sort, and therefore there is a potential challenge, because you could say, okay, how do we guarantee, if you will, that the competence, which is AI trained and AI assisted, is legitimate? How legit is this competence, knowledge, and how can we make sure that we are not dealing with fraud, and we're not dealing with basically fake competence, because that's a risk, obviously, and therefore, in order for this to be not to be real legitimate, in order for AI systems to really produce high level of competence, which would be successfully um, used by companies, because companies will be happy with that, we could see systems where basically we have AI, say, some AI companies, some AI systems organizing, for example, higher education or educational bots, and with a blockchain in order to make sure that all of the progression of an individual learner an individual student would be monitored, and we can see the progression. In having maybe partnerships with companies in the fields where the competence that's needed has to be, say, validated. So there will be a co-validation, a validation by the AI company itself, and by other companies that would be like the users of the competence in the field where it's really important for companies to be sure that the competence is legit. Like, for example, in medical studies, like for example, in engineering, in finance, in many fields where you want to guarantee that the competence is legit, is very legit. It's not like a fake competence. And then there's going to be the issue of what about the data? What about privacy? Because do you want because if you look at degrees, for example, if you have a degree, you're not going to reveal all of the grades, all the comments that you got. You maybe have just a transcript, and you will share that with maybe a potential employer to have a look at the performance you got. You got a GPA or 2.9, 3.9 GPA, those kind of things. So, and then in the system, in the classic system, it's the university which is basically owning the the records, and which is sort of keeping the records, making sure that the records are kept intact. Now, if we have an AI system, you're going to have a bunch of companies, basically storing all of that data and having therefore a lot of data on everybody. And that could be, I guess, a challenge at some point, especially because we have a oligopolistic AI market. That is the AI market. AI is a a family of technology, and you have just a few companies basically powering AI as of today. And therefore, it's any kind of AI solutions, it's in a way driven by just a few companies, or at least made possible by a few companies, because they're the ones having the most successfully developed the best tools available. So that is a potential issue. And I suppose that there would be attempts by people to try to have more control over the data, for example, which is about themselves in a higher education process, in a higher education journey. But nevertheless, I think it's a great opportunity because for a lot of students, for example, today, maybe an AI-powered solution could be very interesting, very convenient. Um, there is still some issues because one of the key attributes of the classic model of higher education is this basically social skills building because people, especially from say 18 to 25, those are if you could say that when you get into university, when you get into a college at year 18, and then you're out at say 25, a few years later with a master's or uh, those have been really transformative years for a student. Between 18 and 25 or 18 and 23, it's not a lot of years, but it's a lot of experience, a lot of changes. And you've met a lot of people because you are in a classroom with other students, you're in a cohort, you get to know people, you get to develop social skills. And this is really critical. Now, if we get into an AI system, maybe that could, be missing in a way, because if you have a tailor-made system which is very convenient because you can take it at your rhythm, at your own rhythm, and so on, that could be very appealing and very interesting. But at the same time, it might miss um, some of the critical, I would say, maturity building that the social kind of experience that you derive from a formal higher education, where you're congregating with your peers, you you mature basically as a human being by interacting with your peers and, of course, interacting with the faculty and so on. So I think that there will have to be some kind of solutions to replicate this kind of social skills building and experience building, which would be I think, a major drawback and major limitation to a 100% AI powered solution. So I think there's going to be some thinking to do in order to provide that also, social experience that higher education is part, is doing in a classic way as of today.
So the paradox is AI can unlock new paths, but also risk replacing the very human messiness that makes education transformative, right?
Absolutely. Because education is transformative, especially for young people. When you're 18 years old, you're fresh out of high school and you enter a college. And I mean, beside the formal education you get, there's also another type of education you get by interacting with your peers, by, having different kind of experience that that you didn't have before by growing up with other people. And the fact that you communicate with them, that you exchange ideas with them, that all of these discussions that you have when you're 18, 19, and 20 years old are very important. Discussions you're having, that's the way your mind is being shaped, that you're having different types of opinions, you're confronting other ideas. I think it's very important. And therefore, if that messiness, as you point out, I think the expression is very nice, because it's true that this messiness is also educative in a way. It's bringing some kind of insights and some kind of experience about life itself, which is critical to the development of a young person, and to the transition, from being a 18 years old to a 23 years old, with a lot of maturity. And the problem is that if we stick to a purely AI powered system without this kind of social experience, this messiness, as you said, which comes from the in-person experience that higher education, classic higher education is offering. Obviously, you have some institutions doing online, but this is one of the challenges with the online institutions, is that, yes, it misses this messiness, that's this social bonds that are going to be created. And I think without the social bonds, maybe you are not going to develop the same kind of skills. You have the soft skills as well. In some higher education institution, we want to train students into soft skills, but there are some genuine soft skills that you are developing hands-on, by just interacting with people and creating bonds with your peers, and having friends, basically. And I think it's something that probably could be organized in a way. So if you have an AI powered system of higher education, there certainly would have to be some events or some kind of um, congregations, some kind of conclave, some kind of basically social events where students and learners would gather in order to create those bonds and to have this cohort feeling, and to network, and to maybe to have some friends, and so on and so forth. I think it's something which probably should be integrated in the AI powered educational system, because I'm sure we're going to go in that direction. And I think we should not probably miss we should not overlook the importance of that human messiness, as you said, because it's part of the educational experience, which is so critical, especially in those kind of years. When you're, as I said, when you're moving from 18 to 23, it's just 5 years, but it's 5 years that are extremely important in your life, because you're a lot of things are maturing in your mind, and your perspective on life is different, and at 23 as at 18. It's different when you're, say, 50 and 55. It's not going to be like, it's 5 years, but it's not going to change that much. I mean, you don't have like this massive transformation as between 18 and 23. And part of that transformation is made possible by this experience you get from the messiness, as you said, of being together as students, and sharing the same kind of experience, and creating those kind of bonds.
Okay, so listeners, today's exchange wasn't about degrees or rankings, but about reimagining higher education as a shared economy of wisdom, augmented but not dominated by AI.
I think, yeah, the AI has to be understood as a great opportunity for higher education. And as you said, learning education is going to be AI augmented. It's not going to be destroyed. It's not going to be replaced. It's going to be AI augmented.
Beautifully said, Professor. Thank you so much for joining me again. And to everybody tuning in, remember, curiosity is not about answers, it's about better questions. And until next time, keep exchanging.